Shem Adonai Elohei Yisrael Mimini Michael Mismoli Gabriel Umilfanai Uriel Umeachoi Raphael Ve'al Roshi Shechinat El. That little passage is taken from the traditional liturgy that we pray immediately before going to sleep at night. And I've not been able to find a source for it, but my guess is that it's really very old, an old piece of folk poetry. It's mostly made up of the names of angels, and in it we ask, in the name of Adonai, the God of Israel, that the angel Michael be at our right hand, Gabriel on our left, Uriel in front of us, and Raphael, the angel of healing, behind us. And over our heads, twice in the way that the song works, we ask for the presence of God, Shechinat El. And I'd like you to hold that little poem, that little song in your minds as we turn to another one from today's Torah portion. The scene is Jacob's deathbed, and in a little while he is going to bless each of his sons in turn. As Rabbi Bernhard observed, it's not much of a blessing, at least not the way that we would normally think of it. But before that, in the piece that we didn't read today, he asks Joseph to bring in his grandchildren, Manasseh and Ephraim, for a special grandpa-grandchildren moment with him. And that, if you want to look at it in the Red Book, you may, not vital. It's on page 296 if you want to fish the book out again. But if not, I'm going to tell you what it says. Jacob says, "The God in whose ways my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd from my birth to this day, the angel who has redeemed me from all harm, bless these boys. In them may my name be recalled, and the names of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and may they be like teeming multitudes upon the earth." And as is always the case with poetry in the Torah, this little piece is very, very carefully structured. The center of the piece is obviously the request itself. Bless the boys, and in them may my name be recalled. And it's framed on either side by a reference to Abraham and Isaac, followed by another phrase which I want to suggest is about multitude. In the first half of the blessing, Jacob refers to God as being a shepherd, and here we have to remember that Jacob himself was really a championship-level shepherd with a long history of being able to increase his holdings. So I want to suggest that the picture he's holding in his mind at this moment is a picture of multitude. And there on the other side of the blessing is an image of multitude as well. He's changed animal. This time he's referring to the word for fish. The multiplication word is related to the word for fish. It means manyness, which is how we get to the rather nice translation of teeming that we have in the book. Anybody who's ever scuba dived will know what those hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of little fishes look like under the water. And that would have made a perfectly good blessing. Abraham and Isaac, image of multitude, bless these boys. Abraham and Isaac, image of multitude. But that's not the blessing that Jacob gives. The blessing that Jacob gives has an additional half line right at the middle of the blessing, which is the most important place. In any biblical Hebrew poetry, the center is where the real meaning is. And he adds the line, "the angel who has redeemed me from all harm." And our translation, the translation in the Etz Chaim book, capitalizes that word angel, I think correctly. So it's a fairly straightforward question. Who is that angel? Who is Jacob thinking of? Why is that angel so important that it intrudes right into the middle of what might otherwise be a very tidily arranged blessing? What is Jacob thinking of? And if we look back over his life, This is a life in which angels show up more than once. This is a life in which angels show up 4 times. Remember that there are 4 angels in that blessing that we began with. 4 incidents with angels in Jacob's life. The first time he meets them, he's on the run. It's that famous passage, he's just deceived his father, he's won the firstborn's blessing at the considerable cost of never being able to see his mother again, and he stumbles upon this anonymous place and puts his head down on a stone to sleep. And he dreams, and in a dream he sees a ladder stretching up from the earth to the sky, and angels of God going up and down on it. God is at the top of the ladder. God has a special personal message for Jacob, and in delivering that message, God invokes the names of Abraham and Isaac. And then Jacob wakes up suddenly and wonders why he didn't understand that God was there. He anoints the stone on which he was sleeping, and he renames the place. He calls it Bet El, the house of God. And then he asks God to promise to keep him safe. So this is the first angel episode, and we will call these angels type 1. Angels type 1 are messengers. They're not described. The Hebrew word used for them is malach, which comes from a verb that means to go. So they are going creatures, and they shuttle apparently between earth and heaven. And that's what we know about angels the first time we meet them. The second time that Jacob encounters angels, he's a lot older, and he's at the point of terminating his relationship with his uncle Lavan, who is a bit of a bad guy one way and another. Jacob has done a deal whereby, having worked unpaid for 20 years, he's now going to be paid in animals. He's going to be paid in sheep, and they do a deal whereby Jacob is going to get all the spotty, speckled sheep. The next thing that Lavan does is to go through the flock at night while Jacob is asleep and take away all of the sheep who are spotty and speckled, and he moves them out of town. He moves them 3 days' journey away from Jacob. And rather than chase them down, Jacob shows the remaining sheep some sticks of spotty wood, and lo and behold, plain sheep miraculously give birth to spotty ones. Lots and lots and lots of spotty, speckled sheep. Try saying that after you've had a few. And Jacob ends up extremely rich. And when the time comes to explain this, he says to his wives, "I had a dream," he says, "darlings, in which an angel told me, 'Lift up your eyes and see, every lamb will be born spotty, for I have seen what Lavan has done to you. I am the God of Bethel,' says the angel, 'where you put up a pillar, where you made a vow to me. And now,' says the angel, 'it's time to leave.'" So this is angel type 2, similar and different to angel type 1. It's also a malach. It also appears in a dream. It's also associated with a place that Jacob named. Abraham and Isaac are in the text close by. God is there, a vow is mentioned, and Jacob is still on the run. But this appears to be a payback angel. Rather than just shuttling between heaven and earth, this is an angel that promises retribution. X amount of bad behavior on Lavan's part is going to translate into Y amount of spotty sheep. And there you have angel type 2. Angel type 3 is after Jacob has managed to part from Lavan, and they build a heap of stone. They build what was called a gull. We used to set those up over graves, by the way, which is why we still have the tradition of putting a stone on the grave. It's to build up that pile of stones. And they set this gull up as a border that neither of them will cross again. And then Laban invokes Abraham, and Jacob invokes Isaac to seal the vow. So there are Abraham and Isaac again. And the next morning they go their separate ways, and poof, right at that moment, Jacob bumps into angels of God. We don't know how many, and he exclaims, "This is God's camp." And he calls the place Mahanaim. Angel type 3, still a malach. Place is getting a new name. There's Abraham and Isaac. There's God. There's the vow. Jacob is on the run, although these angels don't show up until he's on his way home. And so maybe angel type 3 represents a new departure of some kind, and it would make sense that he would be thinking about angel type 3 when he is about to depart his life, perhaps. And the fourth encounter is probably the one we thought of first. The fourth encounter is when he is about to meet Esau. He sent everything that he owns and everything that he loves across the river, across the Yavok River, and he remains alone on the shoreline at nightfall. And a being materializes, and he wrestles with that being until the day breaks. And he himself emerges with a new name. He's not Yaakov anymore, he's Yisrael. He's the one who struggles with God. And he names the place, he calls it Peniel. And he limps away, permanently scarred by the encounter. Any time you hear of Jacob afterwards, you have to imagine him with a limp. So there are similarities in this encounter with his previous encounter with angels. He renames a place. He's renamed himself. But there are no further similarities. No Abraham, no Isaac, no vow. God is not there, although God is recalled in the two names. Jacob is still, he's not running anymore. And most importantly, this being is not called a malach. Anybody know what it's called? This is an ish. This is a being in human form. And angels in the form of ish turn up in people's lives at very critical moments. It's an angel in the form of Ish, so our rabbis understand it, that sends Joseph off wandering after his brothers to get the whole Joseph narrative started, for example. So to come back to my original question, when Jacob is about to bless his grandchildren, who is this angel that Jacob is thinking of? Is it a type 1 messenger angel? That would make sense, that he wants to invoke something that bridges between earth and heaven. Is it a type 2 payback angel? The angel that looks after you when stuff goes wrong? Is it a type 3 angel representing a new departure? Or is it a type 4, which arguably isn't an angel at all, but is some kind of other miraculous being? We could make an argument for any of the four, just to see what's here in the room today, and I'm going to make the rule that I make in my classes, which is that you don't get to abstain. Who thinks it's a type 1 messenger angel? Okay. Type 2 payback, oh, we do have a messenger angel over there, Jake, thank you. Type 2 payback angels, please. Type 3 new departure, new beginning angels. Type 4, it's not an angel, we don't know what it is, but it's really important. Okay, so a nice spread across the room. And the nice thing about something like this is that you really can root your argument for it being that type of angel right there in the text of the Torah. I want to make one other suggestion. I want to suggest that Jacob's mind is somewhere else. Because as Rabbi Bernhard observed, and thank you for giving me such a great segue, it isn't the first time that he has looked back on his life. Last week when he was brought before Pharaoh, as Rabbi Bernhard says, Jacob looks back on his life and says, my life, you'll forgive me, was crap. It was awful. My years were few and bad and bleak and meaningless. And then 17 years go by. 17 is the age that Joseph was, when the Joseph story began. So this is a bookend to further back in the Torah. And at the end of 17 years, some way, somehow, Jacob's perspective has undergone a complete change. And the man who was on the run, the man who saw demons everywhere, is finally still. And on the point of leaving the world, he perceives an angel. And in the light of that angel, whom he describes as Hago Eloti Mikol Ra, who has redeemed me from evil, he sees what his life was really about. He sees his connection with his ancestors. And he sees, at last, the legacy that he is going to leave. And perhaps it takes all the way until our lives end to see the fullness of their pattern and to perceive that angel. And in that moment, I want to suggest that he's seeing something different from all of the angels and mystical beings that he's previously encountered. I think that at that moment, Jacob is seeing Shechinat El. Jacob is seeing not what we would think of as an angel, but the force that made his whole life coherent and make sense. I think that this redeeming power is how Jacob understands God finally to be. And of course then, this is what he must mention as he lies on his deathbed, because this is his line and his line alone to deliver. That understanding of God as a redeeming angel belongs uniquely to Jacob. And that, I think, is also the lesson for us. Because whatever the forces that walk at our right and our left, before us and behind us, our task is to perceive and to connect to and to name the one that is overhead, Shechinat El, the manifest presence of God, for which God is actually, as I said before, far too small a word. The presence in whose light our lives have meaning and coherence. Jacob is always on the run, and he has to wait until the very end of his life to see that. And maybe that's what being human means, and maybe we too will have to wait until the end of our lives. But perhaps when we read this portion year by year, it's an invitation to us to try to do it sooner, to find stillness, to look upwards, to look past the words in books and perhaps even past the words in our hearts, and to sense what is our place in that greater pattern. What is our Shechinat El? And it's not easy work. It's not easy. Jacob's life proves that. If it was hard for him, how much the more so for us. But to perceive Shechinat El, as well as the angels who surround us, that's a good thing to dedicate a human life to. And it might be the most meaningful work that we ever do. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.